Hello there! Today is a special day. It's the final episode of Curihistory Season 1. I'm so glad you joined me on this journey. Creating these episodes was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed watching them as much as we did producing them. But we are not done yet. There's still more to explore, more interesting characters to meet, and more mysteries to solve. And what grander mystery than the lost civilization of Atlantis? So put on your scuba gear, we're going for a deep dive. So, what was Atlantis? Let's start with a quote. "For the ocean there was at the time navigable. For in front of the mouth, which you Greeks call, as you say, the Pillars of Heracles, there lay an island, which was larger than Libya and Asia together. Now in this island of Atlantis there existed a confederation of kings, of great and marvelous power, which held sway over all the island, and over many other islands also, and parts of the continent." These bits come from the book Timaeus, part of a series of fictional dialogues written by the philosopher Plato. You might remember him from our very first episode about Diogenes. That's right, our favorite cynic is ready for a cameo. You might have heard this story already, as it's quite popular, but once Plato defined the human, he loved his definitions, as a featherless biped. Supposedly Diogenes heard of this and ran around with a plucked chicken yelling, "Behold! A man!" Sorry, I can't help myself when it comes to Diogenes anecdotes. Back to topic. So in this excerpt, translated into English by Robert G. Berry, we learn of an ancient nation called Atlantis that was a confederation of smaller kingdoms on an island in the Atlantic, just behind the Strait of Gibraltar. This information is given in a text to the Athenian statesman Solon while he travels through Egypt. It must be noted that Asia in the Greek context means Asia Minor, so more or less modern-day Turkey, and not what we today call the continent of Asia. Libya refers to North Africa west of the Nile. That would mean a very sizable landmass. Of course, none like that exists in the Atlantic until you hit the Americas. So, did this Egyptian source describe the Americas? No. The way it is described, this island would be pretty close to Iberia and Africa, not months of travel as the Americas are. Besides, supposedly Atlantis has sunk beneath the waves anyway. To quote Timaeus again, "But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea." So perhaps we should look towards the Canaries. After all, Atlantis is described as very mountainous in Critias, another book in the series of dialogues by Plato. So perhaps islands like Tenerife are the last remaining mountaintops of the once great island of Atlantis. But the ocean floor around the Canaries lacks any signs of once hosting a great island with an advanced civilization. There are other proposed locations, but none show any more promise. Perhaps we should take another look at the author and the work Atlantis is mentioned in. You see, despite defining things and feuding with Diogenes, Plato had another favorite pastime, and that was talking about the, in his eyes, perfect state. He had already written an entire book about it called Republic. So in this fictional dialogue, Socrates, Hermocrates, Timaeus, and Critias discuss the ideal state. It is mostly Critias who talks about Atlantis via recounting the fictional visit of Solon in Egypt. So how do we know this is all fictional? Well, while Socrates, Hermocrates, and Critias are all historical people, it is not that likely that Hermocrates, a general from Sicily, would have sat down with the others to discuss philosophy. Critias was indeed one of Socrates' students, yet some scholars point out that the way he speaks points to the Critias of the text actually being the grandfather of the philosopher of the same name. And then there's Timaeus, who appears to be entirely fictional. At least there's no mention of Timaeus of Locri anywhere else in the historical record, which is strange considering how well known the other three debaters in the books are. Aristotle, Plato's very own student, also claimed the entire account to be fictional. Still, many pre-modern and modern scholars thought and think there might be at least a kernel of truth in this. After all, Atlantis is mentioned by the Greek logographer Hellanicus of Lesbos before Plato ever wrote about it. Fictional or not, this confirms that Atlantis is at least not an invention of Socrates' star pupil. However, Hellanicus himself was known to both write historical and mythical accounts. So, where are we standing now? We have a fictional discussion which involves one fictional person about an island mentioned first by a writer known to create fiction and used in a discussion to serve as a metaphor. A metaphor for what actually? To be an evil counterpart of Plato's ideal state. Plato does not only discuss Atlantis in this text but also ancient Athens, which he describes very similar to his earlier work Republic. While Atlantis is an aggressive, expansionist naval empire, Athens uses diplomacy to create an alliance against the aggressors. In the end, the Atlanteans are punished for their hubris and their island destroyed. A very typical theme for Greek writing. So I think we can conclude here that Atlantis never existed, but that doesn't mean there was an inspiration for it. As mentioned, the story is relayed by Egyptians, maybe not just because they were an ancient civilization even by Greek standards. Towards the end of the Bronze Age, Egypt was attacked by these so-called sea peoples. More on them in a future episode. For now, it's enough to say that these mysterious assailants attacked both Egypt as well as the Levant. And what does Timaeus say? A mighty host, which, starting from a distant point in the Atlantic Ocean, was insolently advancing to attack the whole of Europe and Asia to boot. Sounds similar, doesn't it? The sea peoples also were most likely not a unified force, but different groups that at most might have been loosely allied. Perhaps not quite like the Confederation of Kings Plato describes, but there are some similarities. The sea peoples are linguistically also speculated to be at least partly of Greek and Italic origin, perhaps explaining why the Atlanteans were said to worship the Greek pantheon, though the Egyptian god Ammon is also mentioned for the Atlanteans. Anyway, even all of this is still just conjecture. In the end, the true nature of Atlantis will remain a mystery that will inspire the imagination of future generations. With that, we conclude today's story, and as mentioned, the first season of Curihistory. I know things weren't perfect on the production side. Neither of us had much experience with video editing. I hope to get more consistent quality for Season 2. Speaking of which, yes, Season 2 is absolutely coming. We will once again aim for a bi-weekly release schedule. Unfortunately, since both my artist and I have to work and only do this as a hobby, we will need time to produce another 10 episodes, so the next season will only arrive after an extended hiatus. But be assured, it is coming. We have already started working on it. Thank you so much for your support, and please consider sharing this series with friends and family. Or your enemies, we are not judging. Liking, commenting and subscribing will also greatly help the growth of our channel. Until we meet again for Season 2. Bye!